Hi, I'm Sunny Dean,
And I'm Scott Drakeford.
and this is the Publishing Rodeo podcast. In 2022, we both launched debut novels in the same genre with the same publisher in the same year. But despite having very similar starts, our books and subsequently each of our careers went in very different directions.
That pattern repeats itself throughout the industry over and over. Why do some books succeed while others seem to be dead on arrival?
In this podcast, we aim to answer these questions and many more, along with how to build and maintain an author career.
Everyone signing a contract deserves to know what they're really signing up for. In an industry that loves its secrets, we'll be sharing real details from real people. We'll cover the gamut of life as a Big Five published author, from agents to publishing contracts, finances, and more.
I mean, this made me laugh, but Scott said one time that he thought I sounded Scottish, which I do not at all, at all.
No, you don't. No.
I just mean that, like, when we went to Edinburgh, we
Yeah, keep digging.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I've got family in Edinburgh. You do not sound like Edinburgh. No.
Up in rural and northern Scotland, certainly not. But in Edinburgh, there seem to be quite a few people with what I would consider a tamer accent. And that was about as close as I could get to placing Sunyi's accent.
We'll call it transatlantic. I think that's what my language professors called it. I guess we can start if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah.
So, welcome to
sure.
this week's Publishing Rodeo, the podcast where we actually fail to make any reference to Clint Eastwood at any time. With us today is Pete McLean. I think we just call you Pete, don't we? Most everyone does. And I kind of met Pete years ago, like 2015, I think, on Absolute Right forums.
Yeah.
He was already a published author at that time. I think I'm going to sound really daft here, but at the time I met him, I remember he was the first person I was aware of talking to on the forums where I realized he was a real author, and I was properly awestruck, like, oh my god, I'm actually talking to a person who writes books. Keep cool, keep cool. And he's given me some really good advice for the years. He's been very kind. You know, when I was an unagented author, and then later when I was agented but hadn't sold, he's later on when Book Eaters came out, he blurbed it for his sins. And also my agent Naomi Davis is a massive, massive fan of the Priest of Bones book series. She's always telling everyone, if you want to write contemporary fantasy, you need to read Pete McLean, see how it's done. So we are really glad to have you on today, and feel free to introduce yourself and say anything about you that you feel is relevant.
Oh, thank you very much. So you're Harlequin on Absolute Right, aren't you?
Yeah,
Oh,
Harlequin, that's
I
right.
can never remember what anybody's real name. Yeah, I thought that was you. Yeah. So yeah, I have been around a while. So I was the guy that got in the Angry Robot open door in 2013. I think it must have been 14. They do their semi-annual open door subs, and that year I was, out of 1,800 submissions, the one person they signed. And they bought a book called Drake off me, which is the first of the Burn Man series, which was supposed to be a 5-book series, but we'll come back to that. Anyway, they published 3 of them. They published Drake, Dominion, and Damnation. And then I signed with my agent, Jenny Goloboy, who was at a small agency in the US at the time. And she sold Priest of Bones and Priest of Lies to Ace at Penguin Random House. And then she got headhunted by Donald Miles at DMLA, which is one of the biggest SFF literary agencies in the United States. I mean, they rep Jim Butcher and Octavia Butler and everybody you've ever heard of, basically. And I was very, very fortunate she took me with her. The whole series is out now from Joe Fletcher Books at Hachette in the UK. So it's Priest of Bones, Priest of Lies, Priest of Gallows, and Priest of Crowns, and the series is complete with Joe Fletcher Books. And again, we can come back to that. And yes, I know you talked about it before we started recording, but yes, it was optioned for TV by David Heyman of Heyday Television, who made the Harry Potter movies. Which was amazing, and we can come back to that as well, because therein lies a tale. But yeah, that's me. I'm Peter McLean. I'm at PeteMC666 on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm just under my own name on Facebook. You can find me everywhere, and I witter endlessly on social about things I probably shouldn't. But there we are. That's me in a nutshell.
I mostly see tweets from you about hedgehogs.
Yeah, oh yeah. So we live in I live on the outskirts of an English city, but it's in a semi-rural suburban area. And I know you don't have hedgehogs in the US, but they're like a natural backyard critter over here, like you have raccoons. And but honestly, they don't root through your garbage, and they are so cute. So yeah, I feed the hedgehogs and I try and photograph them when you can see them, which is difficult because they're very nocturnal, but they are absolutely adorable. So yeah, I am known for my hedgehogs, I'll grant you.
And writing fantasy Peaky Blinders books, apparently, or so I'm told. I've not seen Peaky Blinders. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm told that as well. I mean, I went more for fantasy The Godfather, but I get told it's Peaky Blinders, which is a show I did enjoy, admittedly. It just
I
wasn't really
loved
what I
it.
was going for, but yeah, it's that kind of thing. I mean, my two favourite genres are gangster fiction and fantasy. And I just thought, what happens if I ram the two together? And that's what I did. And people seem to like it. So
Yeah, I'd say it probably worked quite well for you.
it's done okay. Yeah, all things considered, and we all know it's been a difficult 3 years in publishing, but it's done okay.
So your road to publishing was not very smooth in points. I don't know a lot about it other than there were struggles with some of the series and whether or not they'd actually be finished. I think that's something that kind of interests people but also terrifies them a little bit. I don't know if you've heard the term midless death spiral or
Oh
what your
yeah.
take on that is, but any thoughts you have are very welcome. It is an evergreen, perpetually hot
Yeah,
discussion.
I mean, I got in through a very unconventional route. I didn't have an agent to start with. As I say, I was the one that didn't get away, got in through the Angry Robot open door, and they bought a book, and I thought that's tremendous. I mean, I am a published author now. This is absolutely awesome. So yeah, they published Drake, and I'd rather foolishly already written Dominion, but luckily they wanted that as well. And then they wanted another one, so I wrote Damnation. And at this point, I had plotted it because I'm quite a plotter. I had at this point plotted it all out. I was like, right, I know where this is going. It is now a 5-book series. They like me. This is great. They'll buy the other two, won't they? Awesome sauce. And I left Damnation on such a cliffhanger to make everybody want to rush out and buy the next book. And then the publisher imploded, the editor left, and no, they don't want the next 2 books. And I was like, well, fuck, that's dead then, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Sorry, I hope you don't have a language policy on this podcast.
Oh no, God, we swear all the time.
Oh, that's all right. That's okay then, because I absolutely have no filter when I get on this stuff.
No, we certainly do not. Yeah.
That's fine. We did have like one upset person who wrote in and asked us to swear less, and I was just like, well, this other podcast, sorry. 'Cause, I mean, I didn't say that to them, but we can't get through publishing discussions without
That's
swearing.
yeah, that's not gonna work for them the way they think it is.
No, no.
So Pete, so you had it planned for 5 books, your first series, but
Yeah.
did you have more than the 3 that ended up happening under contract, and they actually canceled a contract, or did they just not re-up it?
No, they just bought them one at a time,
Got
man. I didn't even have a multi-book because I'd come in off the street like some kind of stray alley cat without an agent. They were just feeding me one contract at a time per book.
Yeah.
So looking back on it, I was probably being idiotically optimistic, but you don't know when you first start and you haven't got an agent behind you. You just don't know this stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a shame. I like those books. I really wanted to get to write the last one, but nah, they weren't having it. They really were not.
Sorry, we're both
So
really tickled to see you light up a cigarette on recording. That's fantastic.
yeah, well, yeah. Well, you don't broadcast the video, do you? I figured that was probably all right.
Well, we may someday, but again, we give.
Oh God, don't start with me. I'm not exactly looking my best tonight. I haven't shaved or anything. So.
You look extremely handsome, Pete.
Yeah. Oh well, thank you.
So yeah, I mean, when I heard Sunyi mention, I think it was actually earlier today, that you had a series canceled, that was very intriguing to me because I assumed that meant that you had a contract that they then voided or what have you. And that's interesting because I haven't seen that in this industry much. And there are circumstances that I feel like merit that from a business perspective. One of the big things we've covered, right, and mine might be the most relevant example that we've covered, but we've talked about different authors who have their books launched and they're not supported or what have you, and they just don't sell enough that it seems to make sense for the publisher to keep selling book 2 and book 3, but they've contracted through 3 books, right? And they seem to follow through with it just for kicks or maybe to preserve their image. But yeah, I guess it makes a little more sense if your publisher hadn't contracted for more books. It was just your plan and they were doing 1 book at a time.
Yeah, I think it's quite dependent on circumstances. I know an author who I won't name, but he was with a publisher you'd have heard of, and he signed a 4-book deal, and they ended up only putting out 3 because they just weren't selling. Yeah. I told him to wrap it up in 3, and that's all you're getting. Now, I assume / really hope he got to keep the advance for the whole 4 books. I can't see how he didn't legally. But no, I mean, as you say, it got to the point by the sounds of it that it wasn't worth their while doing the 4th one. I mean, it's a crying shame. I read the first one. I thought it was really good, but the industry is inexplicable, man. There is, other than marketing spend, there is no way to predict whether you're going to sell or not. And even some books with a huge marketing spend still die on their arse, and some books with no marketing spend are runaway successes. So I don't know. I don't think any of us know really how it works.
Yeah, that's why we keep having people on. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
We don't have any answers, but we try.
Let me know if you ever get there, because I'd love to know.
Well, we just keep asking people one at a time, and none of them know. So
No, nobody does. No.
Okay, so that's sorry.
I mean, there's this guy, Travis Bickle or something, who I've never heard of, who wrote a book about an orc running a coffee shop and self-published it and sold like 11 million copies and got picked up by Orbit and is now raking it in. He's like, I don't get it, you know.
He's with Tor, actually. We share the same editor.
Yeah, he got picked up by our publisher. Yeah.
Oh really? Oh my word!
And by all reports, it's fantastic.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, it must be to have sold as much as he has. I mean, it's not really my kind of thing, but fair play to the guy, you know. Can't argue with that.
Yeah.
Are there not enough gangsters in the coffee shop for you?
No, not enough stabbings for me and making cups of coffee, but, you know, each to their own.
Oh, that's funny. So I think my next question, about surviving in that mid-list world and going contract to contract, what happened? So you said you got an agent. She went to Donald Moss, is what I think I heard.
Yeah.
But how did submission go for that next book? For
this was wild. So I had at the time when I first got with my agent, I had a very senior job at Hewlett Packard, which I absolutely hated and was killing me. I was working 24 hours. I was literally on call 24 hours a day. And obviously, I'm on the east coast of England. They're based on the west coast of the US. If your director needs something at his dinner time, he phones me up. It's 2 a.m. my time. Fuck you. I need it. Do it. Do you know what I mean?
What were you doing? Were you doing like database IT stuff?
No, client support. I was an account manager. So I was also at the client's beck and call 24 hours a day. And it was, I mean, I was making a fortune, but it was literally killing me, this thing. And I maxed out my 25 years redundancy entitlement. And they did a quarterly cull because it was cut under the CEO at the time. And every quarter, anybody who wanted to be laid off, you only had to put your hand up and say, please, sir, pick me, sir, let me escape, sir. And they paid you your money. So I walked with a year's gross salary, tax-free cash in my back pocket and went, right, I'm having a year off, sod this for a laugh. And I also got a huge tax rebate because obviously I've been paying a lot of tax. And I left in June, I think, so our tax year runs April to April in the UK. And I left in June, so the revenue had already estimated me a full year's tax. So I called them up and they said, oh no, we owe you, if you're not going to work again before next April, here's a huge pile of cash. So I was like, thank you very much. So My wife and I went off on holiday to a very nice resort in Florida, just to get over my PTSD of working for this hellhole for the last however many decades it'd been. And I'd signed with Jenny then, and she had Priest of Bones, and I kid you not, man, I was taking deal phone calls on the balcony of this five-star spa resort in Florida, and I have never felt so rock star before in my life. I probably never will again, but it was absolutely brilliant. It really, really was. So we had offers from Ace at Penguin and Orbit US and Angry Robot, who obviously hadn't got the money, but I mean, they were absolutely outclassed by Orbit and Penguin. And
Yeah.
Orbit actually offered on 3 books. Ace only offered on 2, but I had calls with both their editors, and I really, really hit it off with the editor at Ace, a lady called Rebecca Brewer. She absolutely got me, and I thought, well, okay, I'll take a chance. They were offering the same amount per book, but Ace were offering on 3 books, and Penguin were only offering on 2. But I think Orbit wanted me to change more than I would have wanted changed, and so we went
So
with
did
Penguin, and deal done.
yeah, did you go on submission with a full book then, just like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
would as a debut?
I,
Okay.
I'd written
Okay.
I'd written the whole thing because, of course, this was my first agent, so I had to have a full book to get signed with Jenny. We did have the full book. I hadn't written any of the second one. I wasn't making that mistake again. But I had a rough outline proposal for the whole trilogy, which it has ended up being 4 books. It is now a trilogy in 4 volumes, in a very Hitchhiker's Guide sort of way. But therein lies another story. But no, we did that deal then, and it was so quick. I think from signing with Jenny to signing with Penguin was probably about 6 weeks. It's about the time it took us to go on holiday, and then suddenly this all kicked off while we were there, which was amazing.
And just very quickly for listeners or for people who don't know, because some folks are either still querying or still on submission to publishers, once you have books out, you can often pitch options or additional books on proposal and sample chapters. And that's why Scott's asking whether you'd write on spec. So writing on spec means you have to write the full book versus just an outline with some ideas, which is a proposal.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's kind of where I am now. So I say the series is done. All 4 books are out through JFB, and Joe Fletcher, my editor, unfortunately left Joe Fletcher Books at the end of last year, and I now have a new editor who doesn't know me from hole in the ground. I've had one call with her. She's very nice, but she doesn't know who I am, and I don't think she's had the chance to read the books yet. But the next thing I want to do is a standalone novel in the same world. So not a continuation of the series because the series is done, but something else in that setting. And I'm very conscious nobody except JFB is going to buy it because the intent of it is to be a novel in its own right, but also to drive sales to the existing series. So no other publisher's going to pick that up, are they? So I've pitched a proposal for that, and we're waiting to hear back. But I think, well, I'm not writing that on spec because if my new editor doesn't want it, it's dead. You know what I mean? And I'm not doing that.
You might not be able to talk about this, but I remember seeing on Facebook there was some issue that you were having with the Priest of Bones series, I think, with the formats they're putting the books out in. Is that right? Because they started in hardbacks.
Yeah, a little bit. This is just economics again. I mean, the US isn't very big on hardbacks, so the Ace editions were trade paperbacks to start with. Over here, the first two JFB ones came out on hardcover. The second 2 she couldn't justify the cost, but she'd only actually bought one more, as it was supposed to be a trilogy. And my agent and myself had a bit of a heart-to-heart with Joe about, look, unless you want this to be 500,000 words, which you don't, it needs to be 2 more books. And Joe, bless her, absolutely got me and signed another 2 books, but at that point Ace had noped out. I say, unfortunately, my editor Rebecca at Ace left, again, quite unwillingly, I think, but publishing, so there's so much turnover in editorial and publishing. And I was assigned a new editor who, again, was very nice, but again, didn't know who the fuck I was. And it's just like, this isn't really going to happen, is it? But I mean, this is the difference with transatlantic deals. I mean, I sold World to Penguin, not even World English, absolute world translation and everything to Penguin. So my books in England, in my own country, were effectively a foreign rights deal, which is weird. But, I've been down to Carmelite House. It's down on Blackfriars. It's not a million miles away. I've had lunch with Joe Fletcher. I've never even met my agent, never mind any of my American publishing people.
I'm the exact same. My UK sale is a foreign deal because we sold to the US first through my
Really? Oh,
Canadian
okay.
agent, who I've never been able to meet in person, even though I
Uh-huh.
live in the UK. So
Still, that's where the money is, isn't it? The money's in the States. You don't get anything like the size deals here that you get over there, that I've seen anyway.
yeah, I think so. My sales for the UK were strong because of crates, and they were probably equivocal to my US sales, like almost on a par. I actually have a reader question I was going to very quickly ask you, if that's okay, because we do sometimes get listener questions, not reader questions, sorry, where someone said, I want to hear about the very real fatigue that sets in with the writing career. We're living the dream, and yet after several books, basically doing the same thing over and over, it's harder to find that magic we had at the start of the journey. There's a saying that getting published is hard, but staying published is harder, and this person is interested in, how to cope, how to stay in the game, how to stay healthy. I'm sorry to kind of throw that at you, but I thought you might be a good person to ask that for.
Oh, I'm the worst person to ask how to stay healthy because he says as he lights another cigarette. That's not really my thing, but at least I'm not drinking. I have got tea. I'll have the bottle of whiskey in the house, so there's that. I think it depends why you do it. To be honest, I mean, I write because I love to tell stories. When I'm telling the stories I want to write, I don't get the fatigue. I did IP writing for a while, and that's a whole different thing. I will be honest, I did that purely for the money, and it does pay well, but it is backbreaking. And if you're writing for an IP that you realise you actually don't care about or don't like, it just sucks the joy out of it. I will never do that again.
Are you able and
But
willing to talk about what that was like and what the franchise was, etc.?
in very generic terms, no,
Okay.
because NDAs are a thing.
Yep. Yep. That's
Um,
why I ask.
it's backbreak. Deadlines are brutal. You have to. You're basically writing advertising copy to sell toy soldiers or movie tickets or comic books or whatever it may be, and your deadline will coincide with the release date of whatever it is you've been told to try and sell. You will probably find it ridiculous because most of it is. You will be expected to know it inside out, which you won't because you're doing this for the money and it's not something you care about. You'll be given all the source books and background information for free, which is great, but you're doing the research on your own time, which isn't paid, and you have to make a story to a very American idea of PG-13 because all this stuff is aimed at kids. So, you cannot have any swearing, any reference to sex whatsoever. You can mow a man in half with a machine gun on page one because that's fine. That's all right for children. But do you know what I mean? Oh no, it wasn't for me. Really, really wasn't.
That is.
But it is lucrative. I know people who do this for a living, honestly, but they're pumping out 5, 6 novels a year,
Jeez.
and yeah, I couldn't do
Yeah.
that. Not if it was something I loved, I could probably do it, but I've yet to find an IP I care that much about, to be
Is
honest.
the and I'm sorry if these are super basic questions about IP work, but is the editing process pretty comprehensive for that, or is it write it, throw it in a book, and it's done?
No, it's write it, throw it at the editor.
Got it.
They will tell you what to change, you change it, you throw it back, they say thank you very much and pay you. And then they change whatever they like to a greater or lesser extent and publish it with your name on
Right.
it. And I didn't have a massive problem with this. I read a couple of mine that were published and thought, oh, I would never have written that. But it was nothing too bad. But I know a guy, they destroyed his career to the extent he's now writing under a pen name.
Oh wow.
Because they changed so much of his story that it just didn't work anymore. And everyone is now saying, well, this guy's a shit writer because his plot doesn't work. And,
Yeah.
no. I never did novels for them. I only did short fiction,
Gotcha.
which I think. But honestly, on the flip side, it's the only short fiction market I've ever written for that pays royalties. I'm still earning money every 6 months off short stories I wrote 3 or 4 years ago, And I don't think anywhere else does that I've ever encountered. But if I'd known going into it, I'd have done it under a pen name, I'll tell you.
Yeah, theoretically, Tor.com pays royalties, but I don't think it tends to make any. At least I've not received any. I have published 2 short fiction pieces through Tor.com. You get paid pretty decently. It's about 25 cents a word, which is really good.
Well, that's not bad. Yeah, that's not bad at
And
all.
then I think they have a royalty structure. So effectively, like what they pay is like an advance that storyboard. Then there's some kind of royalties, but it's never
Hmm.
sold enough for me to get any. The only thing I've ever seen of IP was my agent sending around this thing for writing Paw Patrol books, and that was just no.
They
Oh my
they didn't
word.
do much background work on that, did they?
Well, they were like, this is an opportunity. If you're interested in IP work, let us know. And one was like Paw Patrol, and I swear to God, one was like Barbie or something. I just could not even consider it.
It's not really you, is it?
Her book has a kid in it. Let's go with her.
Oh,
Oh
this was
dear
before
me.
book
Ah,
years.
okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
Pete, one thing that I don't know whether you're going to enjoy going into this or whether you'll have a good answer, and that's okay too. But just looking at your Goodreads page and how you've talked about your first series versus your second, it seems like your second took off a lot more than your first did. Do you have any ideas as to what most influenced that? Because you talked about really still loving your first series and wanting to continue that series, but it obviously just didn't find the readership that your second did. What went into that?
Oh no, no, you're right. It didn't. I mean, Birdman was obviously with a much smaller publisher. I mean, Angry Robot at the time. I'm not talking about Angry Robot now because the entire team has changed and I don't know a soul there anymore. But yeah, at the time they had no marketing money whatsoever. So they had bookshop distribution and they got me US distribution through Penguin, so that was good. So it sold, but nowhere near as much as I'd have liked it to. And it's urban fantasy, but it's very much not romance. And it published at a time when paranormal romance was the thing, an urban fantasy that was mostly about gangsters and demons and was basically John Constantine in prose with different name, just was not selling. Do you know what I mean? It was the wrong thing at the wrong time and marketed the wrong way.
I do know what that's like. Yeah.
But yeah, I know you do, mate. I know you do. But Priest of Bones, although it's still gangsters, is proper swords and horses fantasy, and there's always a market for that. And I was riding the coattails of probably the end of the grimdark wave, I think, with that. And I got a cover blurb from Mark Lawrence, who obviously wrote Broken Empire and that. And his Road Brothers and My Pious Men are cut from the same cloth, so there's a lot of overlap. I think I picked up a lot of readers from him, and I'll always be grateful for that. And obviously, I mean, Penguin had a hell of a lot more marketing money to throw at it. It was featured at the New York Book Expo. They were virtually throwing arcs at people before Priest of Bones came out. And yeah, this stuff does make a difference. It really does. But also, one thing I've noticed is it's finished. And since Crowns came out, which is the last book, I've seen a huge uptick in sales of Priest of Bones. Because so many people now won't start an unfinished fantasy series, but now it is done, and I can say, look, I did the work. It's all out. People are starting to take my word for it and trusting me and picking up the first one. So, I mean, it's taken 4.5 fucking years, but it's getting there. I don't think it'll ever be anything better than mid list, but I think it's fairly solid mid list. I mean, the first three have earned out, and the fourth one only came out in late August, I think it was last year. So it's not done too
Were
bad.
you thinking about market? I mean, you talked about how the first kind of book, maybe the timing, you just got unlucky, but was that something you thought about when writing the next series, the market situation, or were you just writing whatever the hell you wanted to write?
I was just writing what I wanted to be. I think writing to market is a fool's errand. I really do. Because, I mean, the stuff that's come out yesterday and is making list and is a smash hit was acquired at least 2 years ago. I mean, I know you know this, but it's like if you write if you start writing now for what was a bestseller yesterday, by the time you come out in another 2 years' time, you're going to be old news and the market will have moved on. You think everybody that tried to write Twilight clones after Twilight went megastar. Everyone's like, ew, vampires, no, we're over that, go away. Do you know what I mean? It's a
So,
bad
so you're
idea.
saying you're saying this is not the time to jump into the Greek retelling market?
I'm thinking probably not, no.
I don't know if I can keep that. You might make some people cry.
Norse retelling it is.
Oh, I don't know. I think Joanne Harris and Neil Gaiman kind of sewed that one up between them already. So
Yeah.
Okay, now this is a really weird question that I'm just kind of curious about. When did you first learn the term mid-list? Because I think there's a point where we all first hear that word.
oh, shortly after I landed on it, I think. Certainly not before I was published. This was all a bit of a horrible, rude awakening. That there is this purgatory of published but not famous or making any money that most people end up on. I was like, oh well, fuck. I wish I'd done this in advance. You know what I mean? But you know, I mean, this is why I've always been such an advocate of absolute right, to be honest, Sonny, because so many people go into this industry with their eyes wide shut and think, I'm going to be published, that's it, J.K. Rowling's a billionaire and so will I be. And like, no, you won't. I think it's a hard lesson for a lot of people that haven't done the research. I really, really do. But doing the
Yeah.
research is incredibly difficult because nobody is, well, I mean, I know we're being, but very few people are transparent about this stuff. Nobody wants to admit that they actually haven't done as well as they wanted to. And it doesn't help anyone, It's I'm always happy to be honest about this stuff because it's just how it is,
Yeah, and I mean,
Did you have any expectations when you sold? Sorry, I cut you off, Scott.
no, you're fine. No, you're good. You're good.
Like, did you have that kind of newbie sense of, oh, here comes fame and fortune?
No, not really. To be honest, I was so surprised they picked it up at all because I was actually running the Angry Robot Open Door submission tracker on Absolute Right that year, and watching the number of people crash out of it, and I was keeping this little tracker spreadsheety thing on the thread of who submitted when and who got rejected when. And when I finally figured out I was the only one that had got through, I was like, oh, this don't bode well, does it? Because I'd read some of the other submissions and they were really good, and I thought, oh dear. So no, I mean, I knew they weren't a big five. I didn't expect fame and fortune, but I didn't expect to get dropped either, I must admit. That was a bit of a rude awakening, but, as we know now, it's a thing that happens to a lot of people.
How did that factor into your expectations with your second deal then?
Well, I'd already started writing Priest of Bones, because I'm not an urban fantasy reader. I kind of wrote those books by accident, in a way, and Swords and Horses is where I'm at, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to have a proper bash at this, and I got halfway through that, and I sent some of it to my then still editor at Angry Robot. Oh, what do you think? And he was a bit, yeah. And he knew it was going down the Swanee then. The publisher was about to be sold. And I just wish he'd told me that before I sent a book that ended on a cliffhanger and he signed off on it. But yeah, it is what it is. But no, I didn't have any expectations for Priest of Bones whatsoever because I thought, well, my last series got dropped. My name is Mud. God, is that feedback me or you? I don't know where that's coming from. But so no, I didn't have any expectations whatsoever, to be honest. And then when Jenny phoned me up on my balcony in Florida, thank you very much, and said, oh, we've got offers from Penguin and Orbit, I was like, seriously? This is good news. Let's have a conversation, do you know what I mean? But now the thing is, when Ace canned me, I thought, I really did think it was all over. Because I was like, my editor left, they pretty much stopped signing anything new. They cut the imprint down to the bone. I think they went from 5 editors down to 2 or something over the space of a couple of weeks. And I thought, you know what? If I end up with a second Dead series against my name, I'm in pen name territory. No one's ever going to trust me again. Do you know what I mean? But thankfully, thanks to my agent's fantastic negotiation abilities and Joe Fletcher's huge enthusiasm for the series, it did get picked up in the UK by his share, and we got away with it and finished it, which has rescued my name because really, otherwise it would be dead. It would be dead.
So that Ace business was that was in the States, but
Yeah, yeah.
your UK publisher kept at it with book 3 and 4. Did
Yeah,
they have
exactly.
distribution into the States from 3 and 4 on then?
Yes, yeah, yeah. They have, It took a lot. I think 3 came out in the US. I think about 6 months after it did in the UK, because there was a lot of contract shenanigans had to go on to manage the handover. But yeah, no, JFB are distributing them in the States,
Awesome.
which is good.
Yeah. Wow. That is. You've had a lot of hurdles.
It's been a ride, mate. I'll tell you, it has definitely been a ride.
But I mean, hey, look, earning out on 3 of the 4 already is pretty goddamn solid, even for mid-list. There should be a term for mid-list that hasn't crashed and burned. But you and Sunyi now have mentioned a TV deal. I'm very interested to hear how that came about, because you hear about that a lot with bigger book, but with folks in the real world, it doesn't seem to be as common. But you seem to have pulled that off also. So I want to know your magic tricks. Also, is that cigarette number 3?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
All right. we're just counting here on the show.
Yeah, I kind of had pulled it off. I mean, you have to remember that selling a TV option and having a show made are wildly different things. A lot of people sell options. Very, very, very few shows get made. So I can't tell you the magic, because I don't know how it happened either.
Okay.
I really, really don't. I had an email from my agent one day, and she said, I've had contact from UTA, which is United Talent in the States, one of the biggest theatrical agencies in the US. One of their agents had reached out to Jenny because apparently he represents David Heyman. So, this guy's not a minnow, put it mildly. And no, I'll not tell you his name, but he's a senior agent at UTA. He's based out of Beverly Hills. He represents Heyman. Heyman was somehow aware of my book. I've no idea if he'd actually read it or not. It's not impossible, but had expressed an interest and had basically got on to this guy, his agent at UTA, and said, get me this. So he'd done his own work, found out who my agent was, got on to Jenny and said, can we talk? And Jenny mailed me and said, I've got an agent at UTA who wants to talk to you about selling an option for your book. Are you interested? I was like, the fuck do you think? Yes! Set it up. And honestly, I had a call with this guy. He spoke Hollywood at me for 20 minutes, and I understood about one word in 4. And said, Heyday Television, who are distributed through NBC Universal, are very interested in this. Would you like to talk to them? Yes, I would. Thank you very much. So he set that up, and I had maybe an hour conference call with. This was they're in the UK, so I had maybe an hour conference call with Jenny. The UTA agent couldn't make it, unfortunately, but with Jenny and the producer and I think an executive scriptwriter or something at Heyday, and they wanted to talk. Now we back and forth on this and did a little bit of fencing over, how much creative involvement do you need and blah blah, and I said all the right things because I'm Twitter friends with a lady called Ann Tibbetts who's also a literary agent, but who used to work in Hollywood. And I don't know if she was a Hollywood agent or a producer or something. Anyway, she knows how it works. So I hit her up on the back channel and said, help! What should I say or not say to not torpedo this at first contact? And she was incredibly helpful, bless her. I still owe her a pint for that if we ever meet. And I had this call with the producers, and it went really, really well. And the UTA agent got back to me a few days later and said, they'd like to sign an option. I was like, thank you very much. That's marvellous. It's literally free money, right? It's 2 conference calls, and then somebody wants to give you a ton of money to basically not sell anybody else an option for 2 years. I thought, well, I can do that. Nobody else has asked, let's be honest, But, oh my days, the amount of contract that went into this. I mean, I do contracts for my day job, and I can read and pretty much understand a publishing contract quite well. A screen option contract? No. My promise to not sell an option to anybody else is over 30 pages long, I kid you not. And it goes into the minutiae of every detail as though they were actually making the show. And I think it's because by the time they've made that commitment, they can't risk you then having a big Davis drop and saying, no, actually, I want this, that, and the other. So everything's thrashed out in advance, including the parking space I was going to get. At the Hollywood studio they weren't going to make the show at. Were they going to make the show? Which they didn't. And you just think, really? It's unreal. And whether I got a producer or executive producer credit, because that affects your residuals, and I still don't even know what a residual even is, but, you know. I let him handle all that, and then they gave me a pile of money and went away. Oh, thank you very much, you know. And then the pandemic hit, and the pandemic rolled on for a year. The option renewed. They gave me another pile of money. Oh, thank you very much. I have done an hour and a half's work so far for this. I'll take the second pile of money. Thank you very much. And then the year rolled, and the option came up for renewal that they would have had to pay for, and the pandemic was still going on, and the producer had quit by then, and they just went, nah. Apparently somebody wrote a pilot script at some point, which I never got to see, that Heyman didn't like, and that was the end of that. But this has happened to Mark Lawrence, it's happened to Fonda Lee, and God knows how many other people we've heard of, but those are the ones I know of who've been public about it on social. I think it's pretty much almost standard that if you sell an option, it won't get made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's nice. I got a headline in Deadline Hollywood, which is a bucket list item from when I grew up reading Jackie Collins books as a teenager, and you just think, this is great, you know. And like I say, it's money, and it didn't actually make me do any work. So
yeah, are you able and willing to share the highlights of what to say or not say in that first meeting? You said you had contacted a friend, and they kind of coached you.
It's fairly straightforward, common sense stuff. I mean, the biggest red flag for a producer is a diva author that's going to demand creative control, because if you aren't J.K. Rowling, you're just not going to get it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like, you know, how involved are you going to be available for consultancy? Yes. And there was a ludicrously large price per hour attached to that, which made me think they're never actually going to want me for consultancy. But, you know, it's nice to be asked, isn't it?
Yeah, so they did
Can
want...
I go sit in a...
They didn't want creative control for the author, but they did want consultancy available from the author.
Available on an if they wanted it basis, but yeah, 30 grand an hour, I couldn't see them ever actually asking for it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I know, right? It's insane.
Sign me up. Yeah.
It really, yeah, well, quite. I mean, it's just like, yeah, this is a keep him sweet, but we're never invoking it clause, obviously. But, you know,
yep.
It was mad, man. It was a whole window into a whole other world. I just think, I don't know how this stuff works. Absolutely crazy. But it was interesting, and it was obviously very, very flattering to be asked. You know, it's good stuff, and it was very good publicity as well. Of course. No, a headline feature in Deadline makes people know you exist like nothing else. So, yeah, it was great, but very, very strange. But I would say, do not ever go near anybody in the screen industry without a proper screen agent behind you, because my literary agent didn't know what she was looking at any more than I did. It is so different.
Yeah, so what'd you do at that point? What'd you do in terms of securing a screen agent?
You know, I have absolutely no idea. This guy came to me. I assume, as with lit agencies, you would go to a screen agency and say offer in hand if someone's come to you with a deal and said, can we option this? Because, I mean, options come from a lot of different places. This was a major production company who threw a lot of money at me, which was lovely. But a lot of options might be a screenwriter who's got no deal in hand, no money to throw at you, but contacts. And if nobody else is asking for it, you think, well, what have I got to lose? But if you sign a 2-year option with some unattached screenwriter, then you've made a promise not to sell it to anybody else. So if production company comes to you the next week and says, can we buy this? You've got to say no, and that's a hell of a gamble to make for no money. So I'd be a bit wary of that. But yeah, no, how you go about attracting these people without a deal? I've absolutely no idea.
Naomi was putting out feelers for film agents for book eaters. We had Nick Binge on a couple of weeks ago, and he said that in the film industry, there are basically people whose entire job is to get on the hype train, to find the books that are hyped and send them to film agents. And his book was very hyped, so he sold the film rights before his novel came out. Sorry, the film option, not the film rights. And I think Naomi was trying to do that a bit with book eaters, but I didn't really have that same level of buzz that I think he did. So we did sign with a film agent very early on, and he essentially said, "Your book sounds completely ludicrous when you try and summarize it to people," which is quite true. I didn't, you know, which is quite true. So we're not going to just walk around pitching it. We're going to wait and see if you can get some really solid sales. And then his strategy was just to like corner people and say, "Here, read it," without reading the blurb, because if they read the blurb, they'll think it sounds crazy, which it does. And that was my side of the process that I saw. Is that Bookins did try and reach out to film contacts, and your agency may or may not have been on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to bear in mind, something I picked up, is that if a production company knows it wants to make book X and it's already sold it to Netflix or HBO or whoever, they will option everything remotely similar to book X and just sit on the rights. So nobody else can make a competitor. And that might be what happened to me. I mean, there is no way of knowing. Because, I mean, an option is a drop in the ocean money compared to what HBO are going to pay them if they actually want to make the thing they do want to make. And it's just a hedging the bets thing, you know?
So, what comes next for you, Pete? Just now that you've wrapped up all the books you're currently on, you're out of contract, where do you go from here?
What I have pitched to my editor, and I'm working on the assumption I can talk about this. Nobody's told me I can't. So I have done War for the Rose Throne. It is a 4-book series and it is finished. Now, I don't know how well you know Joe Abercrombie's work. So he wrote the first Law trilogy, which was a slow burner but ended up being a runaway success. He then wrote 3 standalones in the same world and then wrote a follow-on trilogy about the descendants and the children of the protagonists of the first trilogy. And that's pretty much what I've got my eye on doing. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a lazy bugger. I've built this world. I know how it works in ludicrous detail. It is a playground to tell stories in, and I want to do the same thing. So I've pitched a couple of World of the Rose Throne standalones to my editor, and I've got notes and ideas and things, but I flat refuse to write it because, as I say, if they don't pick it up, absolutely nobody else is going to. So I'm not doing that. I've also got another different world fantasy novel on the go on the back burner, which I mean, I'm weird for a fantasy author. I don't like too much fantasy in my fantasy. Do you know what I mean? When I'm writing it, I don't want to have to completely create worlds and societies and structures and days and times. And I find that kind of thing hard to read and loses reader engagement. I mean, the only person I know who's really good at that is R.J. Barker. His Bone Ships books are phenomenal, but it does take a while to get your eye in and learn the language, the customs, that everything is totally different. Whereas I I write I write historical fiction, but I want there to be wizards in it, basically. Do you know what I mean? It's really not that fantasy-ish. So yeah, so the other fantasy I've got is along those lines as well, but at a different setting and totally different characters. And I did start writing a middle grade kids book. Yeah, you pull that face at me, son. Yeah, I can understand it. Yeah.
How
Do you
many
know what?
people die in this middle grade kids book?
Only one
Okay.
so far, and that's off screen and before it starts. But I don't know what I'd do with it. My agent doesn't rep kids' books. It would have to go out under a pen name. I mean, you can imagine school librarians buying that and then going, "Oh, we'll buy all these others and put them out for the they put them out for the little 11-year-olds." No, I'm going to get sued into oblivion, aren't I? So I started doing it because I grew up on Diana Wynne Jones and Joan Aitken and that kind of thing, and it's that sort of kind of thing. And I just started doing it for fun, and I showed a bit to my wife, who reads a lot of children's fiction, and she reads books to the grandchildren and that kind of thing. And she said, "Oh, this is actually really good. You should write this. You should do this." And I don't know what to do with it. all those children are mildly terrifying, and I might have to do school visits and things. And oh God, no, I'm not sure about that. But you know, it's an option. I might bite the bullet and do it eventually. Who knows?
I don't know if you remember a user called Put from Absolute Right, real name
Oh
Jessie
yeah, yeah.
Satanto, just mentioning her because she put out a middle grade novel in the same year that she put out a YA thriller and an adult rom-com,
Mm-hmm.
and one other book, I can't remember. She's very prolific. I keep meaning to bring her on and ask her about that sometime, but yeah, there are some people doing the multi-genre thing very, very
Yeah. Oh,
successfully.
you should. She's done really well, hasn't she? Yeah, she didn't. Wasn't it her that did Dial A Frances? Yeah.
Yeah, she's done really
Uh huh.
well after a
Yeah.
very long
No,
publishing
she really
journey.
has done well. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I might have to have a dig in. I mean, it's not a genre I know the first thing about. It just seemed fun at the time. So yeah, you never know. It might happen one day.
And this was extremely interesting. I think gives a little hope. One note on the middle grade or kid lit, whatever you want to call it. Man, my 8-year-old daughter chews through books so much faster than I do. So I think if you land a book in that, that readership group, I would bet you could do very well with it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and talking
Yeah.
to us. I can't remember if I told you much about what the podcast was for before we did it, but we appreciate it, and Scott doubly appreciates it when someone makes him laugh. Also, Clay Harmon from our Discord says he wants us to tell you that he loves your Twitter threads.
Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you, Clay.
Yeah, no, this was good, man. It's always good to feel like there's some hope beyond being picked up for a mega debut deal, So it's good to talk to people who have jumped some hurdles and still found some joy in this bleak industry.
Oh, I still enjoy it. It is what it is. I mean, I'm used to corporate America, man. This is not that bad in comparison.
I meant to tell you that the way you left Hewlett Packard is almost exactly how I left my career, my corporate career.
Uh-huh.
And we'll see if I ever go back to it. But it was the same. A merger happened, and there was a raise your hand if you want, and I was like, oh,
Oh
me.
yes, yeah, exactly that. Yes. Please, sir.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, it was time.
You've been listening to the Publishing Radio Podcast with Sunny Dean and Scott Drakeford. Tune in next time for more in-depth discussion on everything publishing industry. See you later.